Okay, welcome to a special episode of the Lovecraft Easing Podcast. This is September the 27th, 2018, and I'm talking with David and Sam Reed. Do I have that right?
David Reed.
And then Sam Reardon.
There you go.
Okay, sorry. How about David and Sam? Or
That
Sam?
works.
There we go.
Okay, so you guys are the creators of, CTHULHU Chronicles, which is a game for iPhone and Android, right?
You got it.
Mm-hmm.
When I first heard about this game, I grew up in the late 70s and early 80s and played games like Infocom, text adventures, things like that. So that was immediately what came to mind, and it is somewhat like that. But I should have made this connection right away, since you guys are working with Chaosium. It's actually even more like playing Call of Cthulhu campaigns, right?
You got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, Mike, you and I are clearly from a similar blast radius and age. I too grew up in that era and played a lot of Infocom. Obviously, played a lot of tabletop games like D&D and Call of Cthulhu and things like that. And really, the genesis of Meta Arcade was to turn some of this idea of what people have been able to do on the tabletop, and now that it's very easy to make these things work digitally, to bring it out in a digital fashion, where you have people who've been writing adventures in all these tabletop games for decades. You see a good business happening there on, for example, drive-through RPG with what Chaosium is doing, with not just selling their games as PDFs, but also the Miskatonic repository that perhaps some of your listeners may know, where people are able to create their own official Call of Cthulhu supplements and distribute them. And we figured there was a similar thing to do with people who have been writing these adventures for decades, playing them with people around a table. Well, why not give them a way to put it in front of thousands, millions of people on digital devices? And there you go.
That's what I was going to ask, because it's got 9 campaigns on it to begin with. But will you guys be adding to that? I mean, can you buy more campaigns as time goes on? I know it's early days.
Yeah. Well, and to be precise, we'd characterize it as one campaign with 9 adventures.
Mm-hmm.
I think is how we would describe it now. Because I think a lot of people will think of, when they think of a campaign, they will think of things like some of these massive adventures, Horror on the Orient Express, or Masks of Nyarlathotep, and these are all smaller, but linked together in a campaign. And it's a combination of things that Chaosium has published previously, pre-existing adventures, and some new ones, which were written by Sam, as a way to connect them all together. Things that were previously very episodic and unconnected are now connected in one tight narrative. And we would call this first campaign, we've called it Investigations in Lovecraft Country. And we've announced that our second campaign will be Mythos Across America.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so do you guys work for, help me out here a little bit, do you work for Call of Cthulhu, or did you approach Call of Cthulhu and say, hey, we have this idea?
It's the latter, not the former. So we are a mighty team of 5 here in the Seattle area, and have been doing the startup thing for a little while now. I guess at some basic level, I started all this in February of 2016. Our first product is also a tabletop recreation, remaster for digital, Tunnels and Trolls Adventures, which maybe that's one that crossed your bow in the 70s or 80s, as well as it did mine, or some of your listeners. And it was going through the process of working with the Tunnels and Trolls folks to bring that game to life that we met the folks at Chaosium and struck a licensing agreement and a partnership there. And so, yeah, I guess the right way to talk about it from a business perspective is we are a licensor of Call of Cthulhu for this product.
We work with them, not for them.
Correct. There you go.
Okay, gotcha. Let me read you, if I can find them here.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a lot of respect for you guys, even though right now I'm meeting you for the first time, because when I said to you in an email, because you first released it for iPhone, and I want to talk about why you did that, because I know you have sound reasons for doing that. But when you first did that, I said to you guys, I think that you're going to get a lot of complaints, because that's the first thing people are going to say, is because there's a lot more Android users, I think, than iPhone users.
Yep.
Or at least they're more vocal, at any rate. So I posted about it on the Lovecraft Using Facebook page, which has about 230,000 followers, and so there's a lot of audience there to get happy or angry about something. And yeah, they didn't like it at all.
Yep.
I don't even think one iPhone poster posted. And then I only say that not to bring up a negative, but to contrast it with, I told all this to you guys, and I have a lot of respect for you because you then released it on Android right away. I mean, you were about to go into beta and you just went ahead and did it, if I understand you correctly.
Yeah.
So then I posted about it again after that, and I'm looking at the comments now. It reached a lot of people. One guy says, I'm in the middle of the first story, absolutely fantastic. Another guy says, I'm trying it now. Wow, it's better than I was expecting.
Awesome.
I really thought it was going to be more average, but it's really well done. So yeah, quite a difference there. And evidently, I've played a little bit of one of the stories, but evidently these guys and gals that are playing it think you've done a great job. So
awesome to hear.
Yeah, it's
well,
really
thanks.
Good.
Yeah, and look, I mean, kind of to what you brought up initially, right? Like I say, it's a small team here, right? And I'll just, for people to understand, right, that how a little bit of the game development side of this works. When we released Tunnels and Trolls, we did, as we like to say, SimShip, simultaneously released on iOS for iPhone and iPad, and Android for Android phones and devices. And there were a few things we learned very quickly from that. Number one, even though we had gone through a process of testing everything and having people, try it out and in a beta fashion and give us feedback and things, there are, and I think people know this, there are a huge number of Android devices out there, right? I mean, literally thousands of different devices from, all kinds of different manufacturers around the world. And on the other hand, with Apple, there are, at the end of the day, maybe a dozen or so major devices between the iPad and the iPhone, only a couple of operating system iterations that most of those people are on. And so being able to test the product and feel like we've done a good job of testing on the iOS platform is actually pretty straightforward. Whereas for Android, you have to do a lot more work. And it was something where when we released Tunnels and Trolls, we got a lot of good feedback on iOS, and then we got a lot of bad feedback on Android from people who, they had devices that we had never seen, and suddenly the game wasn't working. So the process for us became, let's put this out on iOS first and make sure we've got that right, and then start doing the quality assurance on the Android side to make sure that's working. And so the discussions we were having, and after you posted with your community, we were right in that maelstrom, if you will, of testing it out on Android and seeing how it's working. And right. So, of course, I mean, you're absolutely right. Mathematically, there are a lot more Android users than iOS users, particularly outside the US. In the US, Apple is a little stronger than they are in other parts of the world, but you get outside the US and it is dominantly Android. And this is something that, of course, when you make a game like this, you want as many people as possible to have a chance to play it. But our learnings from the first release were, let's make sure it's working correctly on the easier platform to do the testing on before we open it up to the larger one. Because in the end, here's a little bit of wisdom that for anybody who's a Nintendo fan, Shigeru Miyamoto once said, he's like, a late game is only late for a while, but a bad game is bad forever. And you
just described my policy in so many things. I tell this to, I'm a small press publisher too, and I tell this to writers all the time. Let's not do a solid date. Let's say it's going to come out, the book's going to come out around this time, because they'll forget that it was late, but they'll never forget how bad it is if we screw something up.
Yes, and that is very practically speaking how we thought about this.
Yeah. Well, I certainly haven't noticed any problems with playing it. I don't know if you guys have gotten any feedback from Android users as of yet, but
we did, you know, again, it is one of these things where there, like we say, there are thousands of devices, and it's, we don't get to look at them all. And so we have heard a little bit from people who have devices that we're just not familiar with, and we're trying to figure out what is the issue there.
right.
For what it's worth, if any of your listeners do come across issues either on iOS or Android, the best thing they can do is email us at support@metaarcade.com, and then we can figure out, hey, if they tell us what device they're on, we can start figuring out what the problem might be.
Well, obviously they were brutally honest with both posts, you know, and one was negative and one was positive. You know, and then the second positive post where you got Android users responding, I got to think if they had any problems, they would have said so right there as well. So, you know, I have no doubt that you'll have some glitches that you have to iron out, but it sounds like, you know, you're pretty much there for Android at any rate.
Yeah. So far, so good, right? I will knock on wood here.
Yeah.
That you know, games are hard, software is hard, but yeah, it feels like the Android release thus far has gone pretty well, and it is we are calling it an open beta release, which means anybody can get it from Google Play. As far as flipping the switch to actually saying it is launched, for all practical purposes, it is. But putting that last christening on it is something we're just looking at the feedback and making sure.
Okay. Now, we'll just go with American dollars. How much is it for iPhone and how much is it for Android?
Well, the price is the same. And, you know, it is something, well, do you want to talk about how we landed on this? Yeah.
Sure. So we make free-to-play games. That's first and foremost what we do. People can play for free forever. For Tunnels and Trolls, that means a few adventures are like starting adventures, and those are free. And then you can either watch ads to refresh your hearts and keep getting free plays from there, or you can pay a flat rate to just buy the adventures and not even worry about it. For Cthulhu, we took a slightly different approach. You don't have to watch any ads. Your hearts, your lives, we call them trials. Your trials refresh each day, so you get one per day. I think you start with 3.
That's right.
So you can get a feel for things. Or you can also buy bundles of tickets, which act pretty much the same as in TNT, where you can pay this flat rate and just buy the adventures outright and not worry about, you know, winning or losing or spending trials.
Right. And at the end of the day, the price of an adventure is about $2 US, right? So is what it comes out to be. And, you know, it's interesting because we have thought a lot about in Tunnels and Trolls. It's a different game in that, you know, with Tunnels and Trolls, you make a character, your character levels up. In Cthulhu, we aimed more for a more narrative approach because the brand of Lovecraft and Cthulhu, it's all about the immersion in the narrative. And so we thought rather than focus on the character creation, as we did in Tunnels and Trolls, we would focus on the narrative, the atmosphere, the dread. And so we decided to give you pre-generated characters. You pick one of 6 investigators. And so without that, we decided to bring the price down. And so that's where the Cthulhu Chronicles adventures are $2 each. And again, as Sam said, you can play them for free forever if you're willing to only play once a day, for example, right? But hey, if you want to play more, no problem. Buy the adventure for $2. You own it forever, and you never have to pay anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Will you be adding? It starts with these 9 adventures. Will you be adding to those?
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, we have announced Campaign 2, Mythos Across America. Whereas Campaign 1 is a little more. Well, why don't Sam's the one who wrote all this, so let's Sam talk about this.
My turn. So basically, the first campaign, it's very localized. It starts out the first adventure, Alone Against the Flames. The player characters traveling to Arkham, and the rest of the campaign takes place in and around Arkham. And it's very localized geographically in that way. It's very narratively cohesive. And for the second campaign, we're thinking we're gonna go outside the box a little bit and kind of push the boundaries. So Mythos Across America, the basis for that title is that, well, all these adventures take place across the United States and beyond in some cases. Not to spoil it, but yes. And basically it's a more episodic feel. It's some people were missing the sort of, you know, like the faster pace of Tunnels and Trolls. So we heard you. We're working on that for the second campaign. That's something we have a very close eye on. And yeah, I'm really excited for it. We have a bunch of great writers. I wrote the first campaign, but for the second campaign, we brought in a bunch of great freelancers, and they brought their own ideas to the table, and they each come from such different, you know, backgrounds and what they're passionate about, and it's going to be a really interesting spread of adventures. I think everyone's going to really like it.
Yeah, and that's a big part of what's fun about the Lovecraft brand, the intellectual property, the universe, right? Is that it remains very salient today, even though it was written from, you know, a 1920s, 1930s perspective, and the sense of discovery and horror is something that we all relate to in our personal lives at some level. And so, to Sam's point, when we started with Lovecraft Country, the bulk of what's there is pre-existing work from Chaosium and their writers over the years, where we saw a way, and I give Sam a tremendous amount of credit on this, a way to link these things together in a way they hadn't been before, to create a much larger tapestry of narrative. And by the time you get to Blackwater Creek, the ninth adventure, you know, it's, you know, a lot has happened, and you kind of have seen it all unfold from that perspective. With Mythos Across America, again, to Sam's point, we have enlisted a group of writers from all walks of game and book publishing, that some of them have contributed to Chaosium's work in the past. Some of them have contributed to other role-playing games or have written their own fiction, and this is their first time in the Lovecraft mythos being published. This is really what the company was always about, is getting these people a chance to give their stories, their creativity to a bigger and different audience. And I'm just tickled. I'm super excited about bringing this stuff out and seeing what these folks have done.
Yeah, you know, it's so great living in this day and age, because as a writer, these writers that you're talking about, it's not just about, okay, getting published in a book anymore. You know, your story can be published in a game now. Your story can be published in so many different ways.
Yes.
A couple of questions before I forget.
Yeah.
You mentioned by the time you get to the 9th one in this first campaign, are you supposed to play these in order? Because I punched on number 3 when I was testing it out. You guys still there? Oh, they froze up. Well, it's a live show. All right, you guys watching on the live broadcast, let me know if you can still see me. I want to make sure the problem is not on my end. I don't think that it is. And I guess I'll have to edit this out of the podcast version. Let's see if they're emailing me. Okay, so the problem is on their end. Thanks, Michael DeBronzo. Yeah, and I don't think there's a way to edit it out of the archive version of YouTube, sadly. But at least I can do that for the podcast version. So better email them.
Going to miss some of the details, and the overarching plot might not make as much sense. There might be things referenced that hark back to earlier adventures. So what I'll say about that is they're numbered for a reason. Yeah. They're in a very specific order. The narrative, there's a through line that really comes through, and the beginning and end of each adventure, they tie into each other. So the best experience you could have would be to play them in order. I'm not gonna stop you from playing them out of order or anything. But I would strongly recommend starting with Adventure 1 and moving on from there.
And I think, number one, I'd say the way to think about it is for people who are comic book readers, right? If you start on issue 7, well, hopefully issue 7 was written as a self-contained story that works, but you know, the editor will reference, hey, remember back in issue 2 when this happened. Okay, that is what Sam's getting at. You're going to miss a little bit of that if you start away from number 1. But the bigger thing is, as we think about how we present Cthulhu Chronicles to the player, you know, we realize we haven't done a great job of saying, hey, you really should start here. You don't have to, but we think you should.
I'm not a game creator, but did you make the decision not to force the player to start with number 1? In other words, you can't go to Adventure 2 until you've played number 1. You didn't want to do that?
We didn't.
We talked about it and we decided not to.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not criticizing. I'm
sure.
just
no, and it's the kind of thing that, look, this is exactly the sort of thing that we like to get feedback on, right? This is a small studio. This is a young game, relatively speaking. There's lots of ways we can change things. The thinking initially was, we felt like by, you know, if you put in tech that prevents somebody from getting to Adventure 3, if that's where they want to start for some reason, it's more of a negative experience. And I think what we will do, and we're talking about this now, is in future updates, we will simply make it clearer that number 1, Alone Against the Flames, is in fact chapter 1. You know, just like maybe put that at the top and make it a little clear. Hey, new person, start right here. Because again, this is just the iterative process of building games and working with a community, is learning those things. It's good to hear that, like in your case, yeah, I just started with number 3. You're not alone in that regard. We hear that from other people, and I think it's on us to put the subtle signpost in there of like, you know, you should start with chapter 1, just because, as Sam said, there's a lot of detail in the narrative that you will miss if you start later in the story that you don't have to miss.
Or just a simple, to your point, comment before they get there, or, you know, in the instructions or whatever, just before that screen loads, you could say something as simple as, you can play these out of order, but you'll have a better gaming experience with Cthulhu Chronicles if you play them in order. So,
exactly.
Something to that effect.
Yes.
A practical question as well, and maybe I just missed it, but when I did fool around with Adventure 3, I didn't play all the way through, but I didn't see a way to save it. It was either just abandon the game, or, you know, that was it. That was the only choice I saw.
Yeah. Do you want to?
So the way we looked at this is basically the way to pause or save a game is just to close the app. It will autosave where you are. But if you're looking to swap between adventures, that's something we purposefully didn't include for a lot of reasons. I mean, one, it doesn't make sense narratively. It also, you know, it would conflict a little bit with the trial system we have going on. You know, figuring out how exactly that would work, it didn't seem like quite the right fit for us.
Yeah.
But it'll autosave.
If you just, it's the same point. If you just swipe the app closed and you fire it back up, it'll present you with the option to resume your adventure. You'll see in the lobby that there's an adventure with a pause symbol on it. So you'll know that's where you were. And if you elect to start a whole new adventure, it will remind you, say, hey, you've already got an adventure paused. Are you sure you want to do this? And abandon that adventure.
Okay.
And Tunnels and Trolls works the same way.
That's true.
We've just,
Yeah, that's something we've done consistently across both games.
Okay. Yeah, it wasn't clear to me. And again, it's quite possible that I missed it, that if I just closed it, it would autosave.
I don't think you're wrong, Mike. I don't, again, this is, you know, again,
you're in the getting feedback stage. Yeah,
exactly.
We're figuring out what to surface and how much to surface to make things clear to people, because things seem clear to us that, you know, because we're working on it so closely. So the more feedback we can get from people actually playing it for the first time, the better. So thank you.
Yeah, fresh sets of eyes and all that. You know, it strikes me that Cthulhu Chronicles is going to appeal to at least several different sets of people. You've got your people who read Lovecraft and are interested in Lovecraftian themes, and they read Lovecraftian fiction and so forth. And maybe they've never even played a Lovecraftian game, but because this is text-based and you're the main character in the story, it might appeal to them more than, say, playing Bloodborne. You know, Bloodborne's kind of got a lot of Lovecraftian themes, but this text adventure here would appeal to a reader better than other games, let's say. And it would seem to me to appeal to people who like text adventures. They grew up with Infocom and Trillium and all those games, you know. So,
yes.
And then of course you got your Call of Cthulhu players, you know. So obviously,
yes,
those guys would be very interested.
Yeah, we sure hope so, and that is how we've thought about it. I mean, it's fascinating because, you know, Cthulhu and Lovecraft have an audience that is much bigger than just the tabletop game itself, which is a very successful product, and Chaosium's been doing great with it for decades. But to your point, there are plenty of people that there's an experience to Lovecraft in the narrative, right? In the you know, discovery and the investigation and those things, that there are lots and lots of people, we believe, who are Lovecraft fans that would like this experience, exactly as you put it, with the narrative, the art, the audio, the progression, right? When you spin the wheel of Cthulhu, oh my God, are we going to survive? Are we not? Are we going to succeed? There's something to that we think is going to be something that we can get in front of more people than the audience that will play the tabletop game, right? To play the tabletop game is, I think of it like this, right? That there are, I don't know, pick a hobby that you love. It doesn't matter what it is, right? It can be golf. It can be, you know, stamp collecting. It can be coffee, right? You know, whatever it is, there's always a way to go very, 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 very deep into it and make it a big part of your life and your psyche and what you do and what you identify with. And tabletop gaming in many ways is sort of that deep end of engagement. You know, you have to buy books that oftentimes cost $50. You have to meet with people around a table, and that's hard to do today. How do I get my apron?
You have to learn, if you want to be the keeper, you have to learn so much stuff. My son's 16, and you know, I'm a friend of Sandy Peterson's, and the guys at Chaosium know me, sure. And so I get the occasional perk, you know, so that I promote things for them. And they sent me this really nice set of Call of Cthulhu books, you know, with the different, you know, oh God, I can't even describe it because I'm no good at this stuff, but it's obviously very expensive, very well done, very well put together.
Beautiful, I mean, right, yeah. Exactly.
Top of the line. I, of course, did promote it, but I gave the books to my son, and they sat on a shelf for about 6 months, and then he got them out the other day, and he's like, wow, this is really cool. And he's been doing so much prep because he wants to play Call of Cthulhu with his mom and grandma and me, you know, and he's going to be the keeper.
Awesome.
But yeah, there's so much prep doing that, and there's not with, you know, this.
You got it.
And with the phone.
And that is part of the story that I think, you know, we tell to Chaosium, or in the case of Tunnels and Trolls, the Fellowship of the Troll. And as we talk to more companies about that, you know, it is easy to envision that there are people who are Lovecraft fans, but aren't yet in the deep end of tabletop Call of Cthulhu, for whom something like this might be how they get a little deeper and closer to that, right? And we know this has happened in a big way for Tunnels and Trolls, where by the virtue of us putting the game out there, getting it in front of more people, it's in many ways not just a product in and of itself, it's marketing for the full game. And all of a sudden people are like, oh, I enjoy this on my phone or my tablet as an app. I wonder what it would be like to start looking into the full game on the tabletop side. Right. And so I think that is something that the folks at Chaosium responded well to as part of the idea, and not just having a quality product all by itself, but that it could open more eyes for people who want to go into the deep end of Lovecraft, and not just, not just on an app, but also in a deeper game.
Yeah. And I think that's valid. Yeah. Do you guys know Sandy Peterson, by the way?
Okay. I do. And this will be a funny story. I actually met Sandy when he was part of Ensemble Studios at Microsoft, and I worked just a few miles away in Redmond, and got to meet him at a Gen Con doing marketing for Age of Mythology. So this is It's like, again, that's 10, 15 years ago, I think. Yeah. But I don't know that he'd remember David Reed, other than I did buy Cthulhu Wars from him at Gen Con a couple years ago.
I live about 45 minutes to an hour away from Sandy, and so I've been to his house several times just to watch movies and things like that. First of all, you're talking about the guy who created Call of Cthulhu.
Yes.
The Cthulhu Chronicles wouldn't exist without that.
Exactly.
At least not in that form. It might be some different type of story. Maybe be Lord of the Rings Chronicles or something. But he's just a big kid, and he loves this stuff so much. He's so enthusiastic about this stuff. And the other thing is his, I guess, office, maybe you could call it a playroom, where his computer is. There's 3 full floor-to-ceiling walls of games and movies. It's insane. It's incredible.
Yeah. Well, and look, it's hard. It's hard to overstate the contribution Sandy has made to the hobby, right? It's just like, I mean, it's been, it is, you look at things where, again, I'm a big tabletop guy. I've played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. I played a lot of Tunnels and Trolls. I've played a lot of Call of Cthulhu. There is something about Call of Cthulhu that is just different from all these other games. It is for the most part, tabletop role-playing became the power fantasy of, I start as a first level character and I progress from killing rats in a cellar to fighting with gods. And Call of Cthulhu is not that, right?
My son made that observation and realized that too. And that, he plays Dungeons and Dragons with his friends every other Saturday. And he noticed that it was different in the way you just described, and that really appeals to him.
Yeah, it is. It feels a little more like real life, right? We all progress, we all learn,
we all go insane.
Yeah, eventually, I think it happens.
And
right?
Certainly, eventually, we all die.
But we don't progress from I don't know, neighborhood watch person to, one person army dominating the world as you do in a D&D or something like that. Right. And that was not the common way of doing this when Sandy started Call of Cthulhu. It's a huge breakthrough in the genre, and not just the, again, on the one hand, you could say, look, there is a lot of power there in taking the Lovecraftian idea and turning it into a game, but the mechanics of that game are really a breakthrough as well, beyond Lovecraft and the IP. He really did a great job of anchoring a game in that Lovecraftian feel of, we're ants on a ball of dust floating through an indifferent universe, and one day the elder gods are going to wake up and we just hope they ignore us. It Call of Cthulhu is, it really appeals on that front.
Yeah.
The whole point of cosmic horror is that you have to feel small.
Yes.
And I think if they had, Call of Cthulhu, it's tailor-made for that genre. It's tailor-made for Lovecraft, and it just wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have made sense. It wouldn't have been a horror game. It wouldn't have come across as strongly if they had gone the way that everyone else, was sort of going, with this sort of more adventure, sort of god-killing
right
sort of style. And I think that's the only reason that cosmic horror works, is that it's juxtaposed with the mundane.
Yes.
And you have to be very aware of your own limitations to recognize how boundless these horrors are.
Yeah. And to know that, again, and we've done our best to capture this in Cthulhu Chronicles as well, of, it's not just that you are small and insignificant against the tapestry of cosmic horror and elder gods. It is that as you as an investigator start to realize what's going on, you realize you are going to be alone in this, that it's not like you can call the police or the army or a superhero and get help, because everyone will think you're nuts if you do. And so, I give a lot of credit to Sam, to the authors of the Call of Cthulhu adventures we brought in, to this new group of writers we're bringing in, for making that feel, just the visceralness of it, of, wow, this is you know, this is tough. This is dangerous. I really am on my own. We've had people, and this is maybe more family and friends than it is, you know, other people familiar with Lovecraft. But, you know, my wife is a great example, who said she started one of the adventures and she just couldn't do it anymore. It was too stressful. And I'm like, wow, okay, I guess that's good, but maybe it's not if lots of people can't play the game because it's too stressful. So at any rate, it is, that is what is exciting about what Sandy did all those years ago, and we've tried to continue fanning that flame.
Yeah, I have a lot of writers who listen to my podcasts as well, and I can see some of them probably thinking right now, would it be possible to write for Cthulhu Chronicles in the future? You know, campaign 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever.
Absolutely.
Is that something that you're looking at possibly?
It absolutely is.
That's always been the main goal of the company.
Exactly.
Is to bring in everyone, you know, not just sort of a small group of people who we work with very closely. We want to create something that is open to everyone to use. It is accessible, not just from a consumer perspective, but from a creator perspective of someone can just, you know, get right into it, create something, publish it.
Great.
Yeah. And if I might, it is what Sam said, you know, at many ways, the genesis of the company harkens back to that idea. And I will tell you that I've been in video computer games for almost 20 years now, and largely on the, let's call it the marketing publishing side of things. And when I decided it was time for me to do my own thing, I was convinced that I wanted to be part of the creative process again. I don't want to just be selling somebody else's stuff. I wanted to be, you know, how do I get to express creativity and bring some of my ideas to life? Well, I'm not technical anymore, right? I was an engineer, and you know, over 20 years ago, I've never been artistic. I've always been terrible at art and music and things like that, and realized that if I was going to be creative, it was going to have to be on the storytelling side. And that, you know, as a dungeon master, as a keeper, as a game master, I've done that. So I started to think about how could we put something together so that someone like me, who isn't technical anymore, but still writes stories, how could I turn those stories into something interactive with art, with audio, with light game mechanics? And so we've been building out these platforms and a tool set to let people do this. Now it's you know, it's a little clunky right now, but it works. And we use our own tools right now to make adventures for Tunnels and Trolls, for Cthulhu Chronicles and such. And we are beginning that process now with a creators program where, you know, people are dropping us a note and saying, hey, I would love to make one of these things. And Sam is in charge of that right now, where Sam's fielding these inquiries from people, and we're doing a bunch of stuff
there.
Yeah.
For those writers who are listening to this, and would like to do it in the future, how do they drop you that note?
You can email me, sam@metaarcade.com. Simple as that. METAARCADE.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, there is 2 A's in the middle. So
that's right.
Just like
Meta Arcade. You got it. Yeah.
Okay, sam@metaarcade.com. All right.
And we also have an online thing for the creators program. I can get you that URL. I don't remember it off the top of my head. It's something like metaarcade.com/creators, but it might be creator. It might be creator program. I can't.
I don't remember exactly.
We'll follow up after the podcast and send you that email. That's yeah. But that's another way for people to get in touch.
Yeah, that's a sort of direct submission line to just the creative program specifically. So that's ideal, but since we can't remember that URL,
shame on us.
Exactly. Yeah, so my email just works fine.
It's very easy to overlook things like this, and maybe it's because I'm a bit more musical minded that I don't. But you know, while I was playing the game, obviously there's music playing in the background, and that sets the mood. And it's very easy as a player. I think it probably would be very easy to almost not notice the music, but it is setting that mood. And I would think, as someone who's composed music myself, that that's more or less the goal, you want the music to be there, but you don't want it to be in the player's face.
Exactly. I'm very happy that that's the experience you've had, because it's one of those things, again, that's hard for us to sort of gauge internally because we're so aware of it. But that's good to hear, because that's exactly what we were going for. Atmospheric, mood setting, not in your face, partly because that's not the point of the genre at all.
It's a narrative-driven genre, right? And so, you know, the audio that we've brought in for Cthulhu Chronicles, for the most part, comes from people who have contributed to Call of Cthulhu in an audio way. You know, Graham Plowman, Cryo Chamber. If you are a Call of Cthulhu player, you'll recognize these names. You might even recognize the music. And again, it's just, there's so much richness in art and in audio that's out there that we think we can bring into this tight, compelling little experience. You know, so much of, I mean, again, in this deep end sort of idea, right? There's a big, as we say in the business, AAA Call of Cthulhu game coming out in October, the official video game, and it'll be on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One and whatnot from Focus Home, and that's a big deal for Chaosium and for the developer of that. And that's going to be an expensive premium game, and audio is going to be a big part, and art is going to be a big part, and the story is going to be a big part. But it's a very different sort of experience. And as much as there are millions of people, and I count myself among them, who love the high-end video games, we know that there is an even larger audience that wants something just a little less intimidating and to focus on the narrative. And I think you and your audience are right there, right? That it's all about that narrative experience for Lovecraft. And that's where we think about, yes, let's bring in art. Yes, let's bring in audio. But those aren't the, it's not intended to overwhelm you on those fronts. It's intended to be that backdrop for the narrative experience, for sure.
Well, and also you can't play PlayStation 4 while you're waiting at the doctor's office.
Exactly.
Or on the train on the way to work, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and you're hitting right on it. I mean, again, the idea here is that to give the player something, you know, snackable yet authentic, right? It is genuine Lovecraft and genuine Call of Cthulhu, but it isn't something that you're going to have to wait for the next session with your keeper around a table and your friends. You're not going to have to fire up your PlayStation 4 on your plasma TV at home or whatever. No, it's with you wherever you go. And this is part of what we've learned in the games business overall, right? Is that, you know, over the past 20 years, right? The industry for many, many years was just dominated by this business of I ship a game on, you know, the optical media of the time, a cartridge, a floppy disk, a DVD, whatever it is. It sells at a premium price, a $50, $60 price point, and it price waterfalls until it's gone. You know, it's in a bargain bin at Target or whatever. Well, you know, things have changed. And what we see now is that people who love a brand, who love an IP, who love a studio, whatever it is, they don't want to just be stuck in that's all they can do. They want to be more immersed all the time and bring it with them. And now with mobile devices and PCs everywhere, they can do that. And so this is where it really feels like for us that time is right of, well, geez, if we can empower all these non-technical creators who are writing quality work to turn their work into something interactive, right as everybody in the world is carrying devices capable of playing that interactive content for them wherever they go, somebody in this creator program is going to become a celebrity in the community, right? Somebody's going to be the next great Cthulhu writer in this sort of a model. And that's what I get excited about, right? I get, you know, I have no illusions that person won't be me. I know that, but I love the idea of somebody we don't know, somebody maybe listening on the podcast is going to contribute something that's going to spark a community of people to rally around their work. And the idea that we could be an enabler of that in the same way that you have YouTube celebrities or WordPress bloggers who, you know, this becomes their business now, that there's a platform that enables these people to be creative in a sector that they are passionate about and maybe can make some money in. This is what gets me excited, as maybe you can tell by my animation in this conversation.
Well, getting back to the comment that I had from one person on the Facebook page, where he said, this really hit me. I really thought it was going to be more average, but it was really well done. You know, it strikes me that it would just be so easy to create something like this and the quality is everywhere but the story, you know, and you guys haven't done that. The quality is in the stories as well. And I think that's very important to this audience, to, you know, to the Lovecraft fans.
Yeah.
The fans of cosmic horror.
So.
Well, and look, Sam will be too modest to say it, so I will, right? You know, Sam is here because of a background in narrative and in gaming before starting here at Meta Arcade and working on Cthulhu. And it was not a small task to take this pre-existing body of work from Chaosium, which is of a high quality, and to find a way to stitch it together in compelling narrative that is consistent and coherent and feels right. And adding more content in between there, you know, this didn't happen by accident. You know, Sam's done a tremendous job and something that was not, no one's done this before, right? You know, and like, you know, we're piloting these waters kind of for the first time, and I'm really proud of the work Sam's done.
Thank you. Thanks. But at the same time, I didn't do this like all by myself. The whole process started with a meeting with me and Alexi, who's our head of content development, and Neil Robinson.
Yeah, Neil from Chaosium, exactly.
He came over and we spent like hours just one day just whiteboarding out, mapping out like what adventures make sense to use, how can we tie them together, what's the basis of this story, how do we, you know, what is the through line, and how do we sort of piece these together.
Yeah.
And that became the framework for what I built, which was like a style guide and then outlines for each adventure, which drew heavily from the source content, but also tied into like other stuff that was specific just to Cthulhu Chronicles and through lines there.
Yes.
Yeah. It's hopefully it works, and I hope it does, and I think it does.
Yeah, and part of that is part of the journey of a startup, right? You know, we're fortunate in that we happen to be in the Seattle area, and you know, the chief operating officer of Chaosium lives here, right? I mean, we could have landed on any number of intellectual properties and not had somebody local. You know, to do something of quality, you can't just phone it in over emails and the occasional, you know, Skype chat or whatever. You know, Sam's exactly right. I mean, Neil has logged a lot of time in this building. This isn't his full-time job, right? But as a passionate custodian of the Call of Cthulhu IP, the Lovecraft brand, Neil wanted to make sure that this was authentic to his fans, as well as the broader Lovecraft audience, as well as our angle on, okay, this needs to be a successful interactive product. You know, it is, you know, again, it could have been, you know, if Neil lived in Australia with Mike O'Brien from Chaosium, it would have been a much more challenging thing to do. But again, sometimes it's important to be good and lucky, and that was a good stroke of luck for us.
That's right. When I'm describing this game, is it accurate to say that that Cthulhu Chronicles is free to play?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay, and then the next thing that people think is, because I'm not sure that you explained it before, so forgive me, I'm not sure I'm totally clear on this, because when you hear free to play on a phone game, your next thought is, okay, what's the catch? Do I have to watch ads in between? Right. So what's the catch here? Not that it's got to be a bad catch.
It's a super fair question. The catch, if you will, is that you can play Cthulhu Chronicles for free forever if you only want to play a limited amount of times, like per day, right? So, you know, you can play an adventure. You know, we give you, I think as Sam said, we give you 3 plays at the beginning, and you regenerate a free play every day. At some point, if you find this content is so compelling, I want to be able to play it again and again and again faster, then, you know, we ask you to pay $2 for each adventure. And, you know, that we think compares favorably to if you were buying the pen and paper product, for example, or something like that. We feel like that's the trade-off. It is, I'm glad you asked, though, because a lot of people, particularly on mobile and particularly with free to play, we are thinking about this ourselves right now, because there is a feeling in the industry that free to play, particularly on mobile, it's not just a catch, it's a horrible ripoff, right?
Yeah.
It is
it's
how
a trap.
exactly. It's a trap. It is
Yes,
you
yes.
know, this notion of, oh, I'm going to need to spend virtual currency on loot boxes to come back every day, and if I don't, and to be honest, right, we are realizing that this is a business that it's not like those games where, you know, again, you're buying your way to power in a multiplayer game. This is more like you're buying a book for your Kindle, or you're subscribing to Netflix. You know, this is and so believe me, we are thinking super deeply on this, because we know that it is so hard to overcome that impression of some people like, oh, it's free to play. Obviously, there's a catch. You may see us make some changes on this in the near future to just be super, super clear with people. And this is where I don't even know that, you know, do we want to call it free to play in the future? I'm not sure. Right. And on mobile, the gravity of what happens on mobile would tell you that that's the way to market your game. But this is not that kind of a game. And as we are talking to the community and seeing those kinds of things, it is causing us to think about, well, how do we differently describe what we are doing?
Yeah. Because
and the catch isn't always that you're buying, you know, that you have to use real money to advance in the game, but you can start it for free. Sometimes the catch, and many times the catch is, okay, you're playing Candy Crush or whatever. Okay, in between games, you need to watch a 30-second ad, that sort of thing. Yep. So, you know, it's definitely not a criticism at all. It's just, I think anybody, when they hear that this game is free, are going to think, you know, if they don't think the words "what's the catch," they think it's something along those lines, at least subconsciously.
Absolutely.
Yeah, most people have been burned before.
Yeah,
shall we say?
Well, and you see headlines, right, all the time of, you know, a parent gave a child a credit card to, you know, unlock something in a game, and all of a sudden they're out $100, $1,000. There's a lawsuit, whatever. You know, that can't happen in Cthulhu Chronicles or in Tunnels and Trolls. There's no way to do that. And yet, right, this is, again, I'm a marketing professional before I became a narrative game guy. This is something we need to solve. It is, we do see this from the community, you know, on a fairly regular basis. Somebody's like, hey, I'd be happy to just buy the game, but I don't want to get into this virtual currency loot box thing. Well, you know, the laws of marketing would tell you, you've already lost if that's what the consumer is thinking, right? No, it's not that, it's this, okay, we need to just find a different way to talk about this. Mm-hmm. And it's in these engagements with communities like yours that we are learning how to do that. We know we've got something that is different, and figuring out exactly how to explain it to people, you know, on the screen of a mobile device in the 10 seconds of airtime that you get sometimes. This is what this journey is all about.
Yeah. And even,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Sam.
Sorry. Even in the App Store, when people see the free button, I mean, like there's
that reaction is exactly what you say.
Every second of everything someone sees about your game, it's formative. It's before they even get into the game, they're seeing the description in the App Store, they're seeing the rating, they're seeing the free or in-app purchases, which like might be like a little red flag of like, uh-oh. Yeah. Look out.
And sometimes people even see free to play and they think, okay, the quality is not there. It's free. This isn't that great of a game.
Right.
But, you know, yeah, obviously I've been studying marketing for over 20 years too. So we've got, that's one of the reasons why I asked that. And these are things to overcome, but I think you can. You just got to figure out a way to say it.
Yep.
So.
Yeah.
You know, what strikes me is it's not exactly the same, but it's somewhat similar to, you know, if I'm interested in a book, that I usually will get the sample and put the sample on my Kindle.
Yes.
And then I'll read that first chapter or whatever it gives me, and I'll either like what I read and like what I've been reading, and I'll click the buy button then, or I'll think, no, I don't want this. You know, this strikes me as somewhat similar.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and if you
describe it that way and get people in that same kind of mindset as the Kindle mindset, then I think you'd be there.
That makes a ton of sense. And it is something where, yeah, it wouldn't be hard to say, we talk about this a lot internally, like maybe it is. So adventure 1 in the campaign is Alone Against the Flames. Maybe that's the free sample forever. And then it's simply, okay, if you like what you're playing, please consider purchasing the rest, as opposed to being lumped in this free to play space where there's just a lot of dissonance between what we're doing and what we're intending and what people think when they hear that, right? You make a great point.
Yeah. Well, marketing, there's so much to marketing, but the main thing is empathy, putting yourself in the potential customer's head and think, what must they be thinking? And if they're thinking something negative, how can I get around that? How can I show them that isn't so, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, okay. So it's available right now for iPhone and for Android. And I've got not the best Android phone in the world. It's called a Moto, and I hate it. I will never get one again. And the game seems to be working perfectly on it.
So that's great to hear.
Cool.
So, before we finish up, any other final points you guys want to make, or did we cover everything?
I think we covered pretty much everything. I would just reiterate, right? Like, again, it is it's a young, small team here, young, not in terms of my gray hair, but in terms of how long we've been working on this. And it's a fairly new product. And so we are really keen to hear the feedback from the community about all the stuff we've talked about and more, because we do know that, the Lovecraft audience, the Call of Cthulhu game, this whole thing is something that a lot of people don't just want to consume, but also want to create in, as we've discussed. And so, hearing from people about, hey, I'd like to create, we do have a program now where people are kicking our tools around and giving us insights into this. We do have, obviously, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, on Meta Arcade, and we watch those things carefully as people tell us what they're thinking. But the main thing for us right now is just, we're looking for feedback across the board, and for people to try the game out, tell us how it's working at a technical level, at a narrative level. And ideally, if people want to be part of the creator program, they should reach out, because we would love to hear from them.
Speaking of feedback, let's say you're playing the game on Android, something goes wrong. Is there a button that you can push and so you can write a note to the creators and say, this is what happened?
We don't have that in the game. We do have a support at metaarcade.com alias, and we keep a close eye on that. So if people find an issue in the game, we just ask them to send us an email, and we'll have that dialogue quickly about, again, sometimes it's it can be a typo in the narrative all the way up to this game won't run on my device, right? Those are very different things, but we bring all
you're saying the email address at least is in the game. They can get on their email and they'll see that email in the game, is what you're saying.
I think it's in like the info or the help area of the menu. It's not gonna like pop up if something happens in the game.
No, I understand that, but if they click help, it probably comes up. I guess the only other suggestion I would have on the creative side is, and maybe this is something you wait on, I don't know, that's up to you, but part of the game when someone's playing it, could be there could be a section that says, are you interested in writing for Cthulhu Chronicles? If so, email here.
Oh yeah.
Might be a bit early for that yet, but maybe it's something you can add at some point. So.
Yeah, definitely. We'll keep that in mind.
I already have a couple ideas on how to do it. Right.
We have a similar tag at the end of
the first adventure,
Flames, which is like, hey, if you have any feedback or any questions, or leave us
send a review in. Right, exactly.
Definitely.
Wouldn't be hard. Excellent.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. I'll keep promoting it for you, and when this is up on the audio podcast, on iTunes and so forth, I'll get you the link. For anybody listening, I will have, and actually it'll be present tense when you're listening to this, do have in the show link, the link to Cthulhu Chronicles. But basically, you can also just go on your phone and go either to the Google Play Store or the App Store on your iPhone. So, all right. Well, thank you, Sam and David. Appreciate you talking with me.
Awesome. Thank
Thanks
you,
for
Mike.
having us. Yeah.
All right. I'm sure I'll talk to you guys soon.
You bet.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.